All right, I think we're good. Lauren, I appreciate coming on. Welcome to the show. We had met through the Optimist Club, right? You came to speak to us, and I chased you down then and made you come on the show with me. So I appreciate you doing this, and I'm excited to have it's like a new era for the newspaper in our town. You know,
It is. I took over the paper the week before the pandemic, and thank you for having me. It's a good
you're welcome.
opportunity for me, to continue to get the word out about the changes
Sure.
that I've made here. And, after 20 years of writing for the paper to take over ownership, and Horace had been the owner for 25 years. And, it's a new era, and I'm the first female publisher of the newspaper, and it's 131-year history now.
Very good. Long overdue, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So for those people listening, you own and operate the Westfield Leader, which is our town. I mean, there's a couple of different towns there, a couple of different, I guess, labels that it's published under, right? But I not grew up, but I've lived in Westfield since, I don't know, 96, 98, 98, I think. And it's always been a staple in our town. And I wanted to have you on here. So we could talk about the news business and, how you run the paper and how you decide what's news. I think I read a book years ago, Deciding What's News. And it was all about, news is a business. I mean, they want to stay in business. So then it's not just like this altruistic thing. We're just going to report everything. So, but can we go into your background a little bit about where you grew up and your background, how you got into journalism and that type of stuff?
Absolutely. So I
Okay.
grew up here in Westfield, born and raised.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, perfect.
I'm a North Sider. Don't hold that against me.
Right, that's okay. I'm a Southie
Um,
myself. So
grew up in town, and uh, we always got both the Record Press and the Westfield Leader every week. There were two, thriving newspapers when I was growing up in town, and I was really a news junkie, from the time I was a teenager. And so I read the papers every week and would look at I would spot the differences between the two. One was to the right, one was to the left. One would include things in the police blotter, one would edit them out.
oh, interesting.
Um, and and then I became an EMT, and I thought I was going to go to school. I took myself down to Union County College. I was working and decided I was going to go to either paramedic or nursing school. That was going to be my path. And I was really not very good at the science classes.
Oh, that makes it hard. Yeah.
And I really loved the English classes and the lit classes and writing these, incredibly long thesis papers that, drive other people crazy.
Right, which nobody else loves. Yeah, no. Are you kidding me? Yeah.
And I loved it. I actually even elected to do an additional thesis class where I was just writing 4 theses in a
Yeah.
semester.
It's like crazy. That's crazy. But obviously you're good at it and you liked it. So
I liked it, and I worked hard at it and perfecting my writing, and I had a lot of really great professors who helped me to do that. And during that time, there was an ad in the Leader that said, "We're looking for a reporter to cover Mountainside." And I
okay.
thought, well, this is great. Somebody's going to pay me to write something.
Yeah. And it's right in your area, right? Your
Right.
wheelhouse. So yeah.
So, I was able to, I applied, I got the job.
What
And
was the article? What was kind of an article was it?
it was covering the Mountainside Council
Okay.
and the Mountainside Board of Ed. That was my first
The
beat.
town
And
council meetings, like you would have to go and report on the
right,
meetings.
I would have to go to the meetings and go to the Board of Ed meetings and report what happened. And the second week, I think I was on the job, the president of the Board of Ed, who was an attorney, was well, he was eventually disbarred, but he was suspended
Okay.
for some infractions. And this became this like huge story. And I was interviewing people and speaking to the head of the ethics committee for the county. And, all of a sudden I was really working as a journalist. And it
Yeah.
was this great experience. And while I didn't really know what I was doing, and I wish that I'd had a little more guidance at the time, it was also just great to be sort of, thrown in.
So he was disbarred and then he also lost his seat on the council, or one wasn't related to the other?
He did eventually lose. I don't remember if somebody ran against him or if he decided not to run again for the Board of Ed.
Interesting. I
And
don't think I was
he
here
was
then.
later disbarred.
Yeah. I wonder if it was, I know a couple of guys who were kind of in the area who had problems like that, but I don't know if he was in our town.
It was,
Interesting.
I'll tell you who it was because you're going to know. It's Richie Kress.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking of. I had another deal with him with a client of mine who was developing some real estate, and Crest brought in. I guess my guy was putting some money, right? So Crest would represent the guy who was the builder, who ironically was like the jury pool manager in Union County at the time. He's so long since retired. Maybe he's dead. I don't know. And the whole thing was a mess. Like somehow Crest represented both parties. He didn't file the mortgage. There was nothing recorded. The guy went out and got another loan on the property. Didn't obviously show up on title. I mean, there was a huge lawsuits going on later on. But yeah, I remember Richard Crest. Well, I think he was also the prosecutor or the defense counsel or something in Clark. He was
Rawway.
Yeah, I know he was doing something in the town. Maybe he used to cover Clark. I don't know, whatever. But yeah, it takes a lot to get people disbarred. He had done a lot of things until he finally got disbarred. Like, you're like, well, why didn't he get disbarred the first time?
Yeah, I've known Rich a long time.
Yeah. Is he still around?
He is. He's got, I think he's working in title for a title company these days.
I guess he still can do that.
Yeah, he's a really nice guy.
Everybody says that about him, but I guess that's how you
really
kind of
nice
get in
guy.
trouble.
I've interviewed him many, many times.
Yeah.
And he always took my calls, no matter how much trouble he was in, which I always appreciate as a reporter.
I'm sure, instead of ducking and hiding, right?
Yeah.
That's the key. So, okay, we digress though. Let's go back to, what year was this about?
So that would have been, it was 2001.
Okay. So about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's how he became your friend, because you started covering this whole story all the time, right?
Yep. And I've known him all these years.
Funny. That's very funny. Okay. So by the way, the record press doesn't exist anymore, does it?
Doesn't exist anymore. So when I started in the reporting gig, it was the Leader, the Record Press, which went out in the early 2000s. And there was another paper called the Cranford Chronicle, which was bought by NJ.com, Star Ledger, New Jersey Advanced Media. I never know what name to call them. Right. And they did away with it. They bought it, consolidated it, and then did away with it, and just sort of wrapped it into the Suburban News, which,
got it.
The Suburban News is the driveway drop owned by Advanced Media. Everybody gets it left at the bottom of the driveway.
Right.
And sometimes it's all press releases. Sometimes they include byline stories now that they sort of steal from the Ledger.
It's the same family, basically.
Yeah, it's all in the same family.
Yeah.
And that's really for print competition purposes, it's Rena Media does a monthly print publication in multiple towns. I think she's got 20 odd towns that she does a monthly publication in. And that's mailed to every home, no subscribers. And they don't do any reporting or original content.
Yeah, that's more like an advertising circular. I get approached. That's right. Joe Renner, right? I get approached by them all the time. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's really, and that and the Suburban News are really our print competition. There's another paper in Union County called The Local Source, which is owned by Worrell, I think at their peak, Worrell probably had 15 or 20 newspapers. They had the Echo Sentinel, which covered Mountainside, and the Clark Eagle.
Never heard of these papers.
And a bunch in Eastern Union County. And they combine them into one paper that they call the Union County Local Source. And it's like us, it's a subscriber-based weekly paper. So what we're doing is a really different model than what anybody else is doing, in that we cover every single council meeting. You can see from the board behind me. Right. That's my chart of meetings.
In Union County?
So we are covering Westfield, Scotch Plains, Fanwood, Mountainside, Garwood, and Cranford.
So the 6 local towns.
The 6 local towns, plus we cover the Union County Board of Commissioners.
Okay.
And we go to every single one of their meetings. One of our reporting staff attends, either in person or now virtual. And,
Right.
and then we sort of dig in based on the agenda.
But you're really a local paper, so you're really serving the listeners. I was going to say the readers of those 6 towns for the most part.
Correct.
Got it. And you cover the boards of ed in those schools too? What is
Yep.
it? 3 districts?
It's 4.
4 districts? Okay.
Because Scotch Plains Stanwood has a combined district, and then Westfield, Garwood, and Cranford each have separate.
So I don't want to jump ahead. You'll finish the story, but I have a feeling that this little job that you took to get paid was like you like stayed with the paper for the rest of your life. So
I pretty much did. So I, the assignment editor at the time, left the paper to, got another job in the political sphere of the world. And, Horace said, does anybody want to come in and do some copy editing? We need a hand. And I came in to do copy editing, and it was a part-time job, which was great because I was, putting myself through school.
Mhm.
And at the time I was putting myself through by working at Quick Check as an assistant manager.
Yeah, whatever. It's part, it's a
Well, they
job.
had a great tuition
Gonna pay you.
reimbursement program.
Oh,
So
even better. You don't think about some place like that, like Starbucks has stuff like that too, where you go work part-time and they pay your tuition as you go.
yeah, I mean, they
Yeah.
paid a big chunk of my tuition to Union County College, which was great. Um, and I had this, I was going to go to Kane. I had applied and was admitted when I finished my associates. I was going to finish my bachelor's at Kane. But I started working in the office, and Horace said to me, well, do you want to be the assignment editor? He promoted me and gave me a full-time job and benefits.
Okay. Because the county colleges are only 2-year programs, right? Then you
Right.
have to go to Kane, Rutgers, whatever.
Right. And the county college is great because you can take your associates to any state school. They have an agreement with all the state schools where you get to keep your whole 60 credits.
Right. It automatically transfers.
It automatically transfers. You don't have to
Right.
go through any kind of process with a school to argue about which credits they're going to take. So I didn't go to Kane, and I took the full-time job as the assignment editor because, it was a full-time job with benefits. And
Isn't that what you're trying to get you're trying to go to Kane to get a full-time job. You already have the full-time job. So you're thinking, I like this, right?
right, it was great.
Yeah.
So I was the assignment editor, and at that point I was covering the Westfield Town Council as my reporting beat, in addition to everything else that happened in town. I mean, it was like and it was a pretty wild ride. I mean, I got to cover, so I covered so much stuff. Like, we were covering we had a cold case murder trial that I got to cover. What else? I mean, there was a Westfield connection to the DC snipers.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't remember all this stuff. I was way back.
The guy who had gotten them their IDs was a Westfield guy.
Really? Was that the ones who were shooting through the trunk of their car?
That's the one.
Yeah, like a father and son or something like that.
Yep.
That's always good. I remember when I moved to Westfield, my grandmother, the one thing she wanted to tell me about, she was all excited about, was John List. I'm like, Grandma, that's what you're telling everybody about where I'm moving to? Please don't, And that was in what, the 70s or something, or the 80s?
That was the 70s. And and we covered it when List, the leader had covered the murder trial when he was caught, and I guess it was the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
And then we covered it when he died, again.
Yeah, in prison, right? Yeah. For those people listening, John List, if you look him up, was a guy who murdered his entire family and then went on the run for, what was that, 30 years or something?
Yeah,
and
it was
there were
like 20
movies made
years.
about it and all kinds of news programs. And Westfield became infamous, let's use the word instead of famous.
Well, and that's the Westfield Leader sort of trivia, is that the brothers who owned the paper before Horace did were actually the ones who bought the List house out of foreclosure. After List murdered his family and went on the run, the house went into foreclosure, and it was the Bauer brothers who bought it, one of whom passed away fairly young, and the other of whom, who was the publisher at the time, was actually murdered by his estranged ex-wife in the Westfield Leader office on Elm Street.
Oh my God, I didn't know that either. And I think that house eventually caught fire too, right? But was that after he was murdered?
No, that was before. That was before the Bowers bought it when it was an empty lot.
Oh, so it had, or that fire had already occurred.
That fire had already occurred, I
Yeah,
believe.
there was all kinds of stories about people. Maybe it
All
was
kinds
set
of
because
stories.
people had superstitions about, yeah,
Yeah, the list murders were a big ghost story growing up in town,
yeah.
especially before he was captured.
It was
You
a
know,
big ghost story in all of New Jersey. I grew up in
yeah.
Essex County. We know about it. Yeah, that was crazy stuff. Did you just made me think of something. Did you guys cover what was that story recently with that house?
The Watcher House.
Yeah. That was good. That was another fan. My friend, I had a friend in like New Zealand. He's like, I read about this. I'm like, really?
Well,
You know?
so we didn't break the Watcher story. A wire service, even though some people think that we did,
So you
we
want to
did
tell
not.
people roughly what the story was?
So the Watcher story, there was a lawsuit was filed in Union County by a family who claimed that they were getting, and they did get a bunch of letters that were very, very creepy and threatening.
And
Uh,
anonymous, right?
and anonymous. They were signed from the Watcher, who
Right.
claimed to have been watching the house for a very long time, for generations, that his
Passed
father
down, right? Yeah.
watched the house before him, and now he was watching the house, and to check inside the walls, and very creepy, very disturbing letters. The family that received the letters filed a lawsuit against the former owner, saying that they knew about this and never disclosed it. A wire service that covers court matters all over the country picked up the story, wrote a story about it. The Ledger ran the
Because of the
story
lawsuit, because now it's public information.
only because of the lawsuit.
Got it.
And they didn't file the lawsuit anonymously. It was public record and of who it was and who they were suing, and the whole story. So so it got picked up by the Ledger, and then it went pretty viral. So that was, I wrote a lengthy story about it, and that's sort of the advantage of being a weekly paper. I always say is that we always have more time, and we're not, we don't
Right.
push ourselves to be part of the 24-hour news cycle so much
Yeah.
on things like that. So we did a full title search. We paid for a title company to do the title search on the house, got the name of every single owner. I personally spoke to every family that had lived in the house, with the exception of the original builders, and only because I couldn't find any of their descendants.
Right.
And everybody said that nothing had ever happened in the house all the time they lived there. I spoke to one girl who got married in the backyard of the house, having grown up there. Everybody said nothing happened. I was able to source a bunch of information that it was female DNA on the envelopes, not male. And
Weird.
I saw the letters. They're certainly very creepy.
Yeah.
So we had a lengthy piece on it, and the folks who were suing didn't like that very much.
Public information. And it's definitely newsworthy. You had TV crews that were showing up at the house. Now I think it's changed hands again, right? They eventually sold it. There's
They
a new
did
couple
eventually
living there
sell
or
it.
something. Yeah. And nothing's happened since then. I think the whole
Well,
thing was
not that we've heard.
yeah. I mean, I know it wasn't made up, but the person who wrote the letters obviously made it up. So I don't think there's children in the walls or something like that, whatever they were saying. I spoke to the attorney once who represented them, and he's like, listen, I can't even show you these letters. If you want to see them, you got to come to my office, but they're really bad. So I'm like, no, thanks. I forget why I spoke to him. Some other real estate thing going on. But yeah, I mean, we have a weird town, kind of quiet, but some things happen every once in a while. But there's you got 6 towns, so things can happen in other towns too.
Yeah, I mean, we've had everything.
Yeah. Floods, hurricanes, had some
Yep.
fun stuff. You got the cicadas are coming. You're going to cover those. It's going to be disgusting if they do come out of the ground. I haven't seen any yet.
I saw a map recently that said that we're not getting Brood X here.
Good. Thank God. My daughter's graduating high school. My wife, like, I think stays up every night worrying about the next morning. She's going to see these swarms of locusts in our backyard. And you know what I mean? I don't know. You were here. So the last time it was disgusting.
Oh, it was so gross. They're everywhere. And I remember when I was a kid, I have this very vivid memory of them being everywhere. And the crossing guard at Franklin School holding her stop sign in one hand and a tennis racket in the other to
Yeah.
swat them away.
Oh, and those shells on the ground. And
And then everything goes
nasty.
crunch, crunch. It's so gross.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. My kids are screaming on the way to school. So that's good to know. I'm glad to hear that we're not being, because I figured they would have started coming up already if it was here, it's
we're
May.
not Brood X territory apparently. So you probably see some, but no major swarm.
Nice. So we got a couple of years maybe to hold our breath. All right. So you've been there for a long time, and the paper, you said, what year was the paper founded?
1890, September 5th of 1890.
Yes. And there's been how many editors? 4, 5?
So I'm actually number 10 or 11.
Oh, okay. So but Horace was an editor for a long time, wasn't he?
24 years.
Was he the longest or no?
No, he's not the longest. So the paper changed hands a bunch of times after it was founded. The guy who founded it was actually the superintendent of schools in Westfield.
Yeah, that would seem like a conflict of interest today, but maybe in those days.
In those days, I guess it was.
You were the mayor, the fire chief, and the police chief, right?
Right. I can't imagine anyone doing that today, but in 1890, I guess things were a little looser.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then it changed hands a whole bunch of times. And then the Lee family owned it for a very long time. Mr. Lee, the senior Mr. Lee, was one of the founders of the Westfield Rotary Club. And they were pretty, a great family, lived in town a long time. He died pretty suddenly. His son was finishing up at Lehigh University and came home with a freshly printed degree and took over the paper until he retired. And then they sold it, and I forget who they sold it to. Somebody who didn't make it very long, and then the Bowers bought it, and it was really in sort of some big financial trouble at the end of when Horace bought it. Yeah. Pretty big financial trouble. And I give Horace a ton of credit because he took it from the old typeset, which they were still doing, to a fully digital format.
You mean like the typeset when they would make plates and they would
Yes.
literally run them through presses and stuff?
Yes.
Wow. They don't do any of that stuff anymore, right? Nobody.
No.
Yeah, it's too expensive. My God.
It would be. I mean, it's already expensive. I can't even imagine what that would cost. But Horace was the first one to say to the printer, "We want to send you a PDF," and they couldn't even do it when he wanted to send it to them. And when I started, we weren't even emailing it because it was too big. We would put it on.
You need to drop it, some FTTP or whatever that was, FTP, right? That was like a Dropbox type of technology.
Yeah, so we would actually put it on a drive and drive it out to the printer.
You would drive it out to the printer?
We would drive it out to the printer every week.
Right. Yeah, but this wasn't 1964. This was the early 2000s.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the internet's had only been around, 6 years at that point, 8 years.
Yeah. I mean, it was really, and the files were too big to go over the internet on a dial-up connection.
Dial-up connection. Our kids don't even know what that is. The modems. They don't even know what the word modem is. Everything's just connected.
Right.
They want it to just work, which I guess it does in most cases.
I made the mistake of saying to my kids to tape a show recently, and they said, "What's tape?"
But tape, right? Exactly. I say that all the time. We're going to tape an episode. Yeah, because they don't even know what VCRs are, or VHS tapes, or any of that stuff. Cassettes, forget it. Yeah. So how big's your staff?
20.
20 full time?
No, I have
some of them are freelance.
7 of us in the office full time, and then I've got some basically full time writers, but they're remote, and then some additional writers and photographers for a total
that are
of 20.
freelance that work for you and maybe other papers when they need work or whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, everybody's an employee now because the state of New Jersey says everybody's got to be an employee. That's
Right.
part of the business end of things.
Right. Yeah, that's a whole DOL thing. I've had to deal with that for clients as well because they're like, no, well, I mean, they work for three other papers. I'm like, that has nothing to do with it. That's not the test. They
That's
could
not the
be an
test.
employee of three different papers. They get it's whether you should be on a W-2 or on a 1099. And yeah, that's a whole nother episode, probably with an employment lawyer I could talk to. So okay, so you got 20 people. So let's talk a little bit about the whole news business and running the paper and stuff. Were you, as you moved up and been there a long time, you said what, 20 years you've been there, right?
20 years. So I was an editor, and then I went back to just reporting while I finished my bachelor's degree at Thomas Edison State University. I got married. I had a couple of kids.
Nice.
Uh, I worked in marketing for a while for one of
And you
the.
still live in town?
I live in Clark.
Oh yeah, you live but in the area. Okay.
Well, I married a
And
Clark guy, so I tell him all the time I married down, he married up.
he dragged you across state lines.
Yep.
So did you get involved in management later on?
So
Editor management? Is that kind of
not really. I came back as I was basically the front page editor for a while, and Horace was, once again kind of cutting edge of letting me strike the work from home in the office, some days balance. So I would come in only on press days.
for the
Uh,
kids and your family and stuff like that?
right. So I was able to, write and edit from home really,
Yeah.
and kind of strike the balance. And, I mean, not that I was never involved in the sales end of the paper, as a job, not to say that I didn't, manage to rope in some ads over the years myself,
Yeah. It wasn't your job.
but it wasn't my job. So,
Right.
I had a working knowledge of it.
But you weren't
And
like, I'm going to own a paper someday. Like that wasn't
n-
really.
not really. I mean, no. And it's funny because my dad had a store in Elizabeth. He owned a pharmacy, and I grew up working in his store, and getting up at 6 in the morning and going to open the store, and
Yeah.
and we were open 365 days a year because
Yeah.
my
It's
father's
hard.
attitude was, we got to open. Somebody's going to need an emergency prescription, and this was, long before the 24-hour CVS's.
Right. They were all
His
mom and pop. Sure.
our phone number was on the window of the store for after hours phone calls, and
Right.
that
If
would
something
happen.
came up, people would call your dad.
People would call at home at 2 in
He's
the
the local
morning.
pharmacist. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No,
Um,
it's different now.
totally different. So,
Yeah.
we were open. Like I remember getting up at 4 in the morning on Christmas to like do Christmas morning. Um, and we were a mixed family, so we did everything. Passover was at my grandma's house, and Christmas was at our house. And
We're like that too. My kids are like, I'm going to do that too. I want Christmas and Hanukkah and Passover and Easter. And, yeah, whatever works for you.
we did it all. But yeah, we would get up at like 4 on Christmas morning to open presents, and then take off, to the store to go open up because somebody was going to need to buy film and batteries.
So he would be open Christmas Day
Yep,
and New Year's Day.
and New Year's Day.
Yeah, because it was all local in those days. That was like the community, right? I mean, it pretty
Yeah,
relied on those types of things.
and he was in business over 40 years in Elizabeth. Um, and so I grew up, in an entrepreneur family. And his dad had a pharmacy in South Plainfield when he was growing up. So, and I saw what went into owning a business. So when you asked me when I was younger, I was like, no, I'm never going to
Yeah,
own a business.
never. I'm
That's
gonna get
so
up
much
4
work.
o'clock
I
in the
want it to
morning.
be
Yeah.
somebody else's headache. I knew all the headaches that went into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and then, he eventually sold the business. I guess I was about 18 when he sold the store to then Eckerd Pharmacy
Yeah. Eckerd's right. They got bought, I think, by CVS eventually.
eventually.
Yeah.
So so I saw a lot of business stuff growing up. I was, it wasn't a secret of, you had to pay the suppliers and, order all the stock for your store. And then I worked, for Quick Check as an assistant manager. So the business end of things really was something I grew up with.
Yeah, I mean the secret, it's not a secret, but the knack or the difficulty with business, right, is all the business development. How do you keep the things going out of the store that you're bringing into the store, or how do you get people to to want to advertise in your newspaper? I mean, that's the only way. Well, you're subscriber based too, but I can't imagine that the paper could stay open on subscribers alone.
No,
Um,
the subscription revenue is not
right,
enough
I didn't
at
think
all.
so. Yeah,
Um, so the subscription revenue really doesn't even cover the cost of printing the paper.
doesn't.
Um, it doesn't. It covers the cost of mailing the paper
To the subscriber's home.
to the subscriber's home, and we make a little bit,
How much
depending
is
on.
it? What does it cost for an episode for an edition? Like if I wanted to buy the Westfield Leader just today, unless I'm not a subscriber,
You're going to
I
pay a
honest
dollar at the newsstand.
$1. Yeah. So I always thought that like $1. How could it possibly be that they make any money? Because a lot of it comes from advertisers.
Right. So all the support, all the revenue really comes from advertising. Um, and that's a combination of things. It's display advertising, it's advertorials, um, and then we drive the print
Advertorials is like an article that's really an advertisement somebody's paying for, but it looks like an article, right?
Right. Right. And in
Okay.
the fine print underneath, it says paid
Yeah, that's
advertorial.
right. Exactly. Right. But it looks a little bit better for the guy who's advertising, talks more about his business. I guess you could
Right.
charge more, right? Because you're providing more service, more value.
Well, the advertorials are cheaper than the display ads.
Oh, that's funny.
And the display ads, some people create them themselves, some we get from ad agencies, some we can make them for you. We have a full-time production associate who's very talented.
A designer for the layout and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Got it. Got it. So is the running of the paper, so from a business standpoint, because this is a business podcast, is it more about like do you find yourself picking and choosing between like the news that you're covering to to appeal to your subscriber base, to appeal to your advertisers? Is there any kind of a conflict that exists between those two bodies?
So there can be.
Okay.
We try really hard to be a different sort of newspaper. So we want to present the facts and just the facts on the front page and hold the editorial section to a different page and keep those things separate from one another, which a lot of newspapers don't do anymore.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's what the Westfield Leader did prior to your arrival. I've heard stories, I've seen copies of articles where they were a little political, a little in between, a little picking, choosing between groups in town and stuff like that. But that's the news business, right?
And that's the thing. Like, I tell all the reporters, I told them from the day I took over, and then when I hire a new reporter, I don't care what your politics are. They don't belong in your news story. You can think whatever you want. You can have whatever politics you want in your personal life. But if I see it in your news stories, I'm going to fire you.
Right. It's not a soapbox for your political agenda.
Right.
Right. But you don't endorse candidates or anything, right?
I won't endorse a candidate. I hold no political affiliation personally. And I think that it's really important. We have enough people telling us on TV every day what to think.
That's true.
That people need someplace to go where they're going to just read straight news and just the facts. Now, the politicians may not always like what the facts are.
Right. Yeah, because the politicians, they're just going to put an ad in like anyone else, right? I mean, that's
right. And sometimes the news stories are going to go a way that one party likes over the other, but that's not my fault or my problem.
right. You're just reporting the actual facts because I mean, there's some divisiveness, I think, that's coming up with the mayoral election, but a lot of it has to do with the economy and everything that's happened and and so forth. But I'm sure you'll just report what's going on.
Right.
Right. Now, is there rules for like political candidates? Like somebody can't go, assuming they had the money, and buy up all the ad space in the newspaper, right? And then there'd be no room for. Well, I guess you just add pages, right?
Well, we'll just print more pages. So,
Yeah.
and that's the business end of it. That's how it works. So we have a minimum page count of 12 with the printer, and that's what we ran through the height of the pandemic. We were at the minimum because we just didn't have the ad revenue to support it. I mean, that was a fascinating time. We went from doing, you know, $10,000 a week in ad revenue to doing 2.
Yeah, well, because businesses were just closed. They had no
Right.
cash flow,
I mean,
right?
everybody was shut down. So,
Yeah,
and a bulk of our advertising was event-based stuff, symphony orchestra performances, playhouses.
yeah, those were all closed.
Everybody got shut down.
Yeah,
And here we were, an essential business, still coming into the office every day alone downtown Westfield, watching the tumbleweeds go by.
right.
But parking was great.
Yeah, I'm sure parking was easy, and there was plenty of news.
Right. And there
Different
was
kind of
plenty of
news.
news. And so it was my goal to double down and just communicate all of what was going on in terms of COVID, but also just keeping an eye on the governing bodies. Because, if we're not going to those meetings, if we're not reporting on what's going on, people really don't know what's happening. And, this week was a really good example of that, where, there was an ordinance on the agenda, and the council, and by all right, reads the ordinance by title. It's an ordinance to amend this code, this chapter of this thing to change the land use, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And they approve it, and that's fine. And
Right.
I run a headline that says, it wasn't the headline, but it was like, 200 and some odd apartments coming to Williams Nursery. And everybody's going, well, I listened to the meeting. That wasn't said. So, but we actually read the package. Like,
Right.
that's our
Well,
job.
you have to be there during the presentation, right? Basically to the planning board,
Right. Well, it hasn't even made it to the planning board yet. This was a change of
to allow for the zoning.
They're moving over a bunch of the affordable housing units to that piece of land.
So Williams Nursery is closing?
They have an interested developer, and so it is in the process, and they offered up some conceptual drawings, and Williams has been on the list of affordable housing available properties for about 20 years, and they have an interested developer. And
they get enough money, they'll close the nursery. It's probably been in town forever.
Yeah, multiple generations there too. And that'll be sad, but that's the rules right now with affordable housing in New Jersey. I mean,
yeah, the Mount Laurel rules. Well, that probably would satisfy a lot of people because they don't want to have affordable housing in the middle of town.
But at the same time, affordable housing in New Jersey is not really affordable housing.
Right. I mean, that's a relative term. We're not in the Ozarks or in Appalachia.
Right. So, and it's based on median income, and Westfield's median income is very high. So,
right.
You've got to be making, like $50,000 to qualify for the middle of the high end of affordable housing is like $50,000. The lowest end is like $25,000 a year, right, as a single person. So,
yeah, they're not moving from Irvington because they won't be able to live. Cost of living is higher, right, with us.
Yeah,
in our area. Yeah.
Yeah, the rent structure is automatically higher because it's based on that median income, and the median income in Westfield is well over $100,000. So.
Got it. Well, yeah, there's a lot of that stuff going on because I'm in front of the planning board sometimes for clients, and yeah, half the people don't know what's going on because it just says what it's supposed to say. It says this is the ordinance and this is the name, and we passed it.
Right.
So.
And people listen to the soundbite, but we dig into the whole packet and read the actual full text of the ordinance and go through and keep people informed. And that's, when people, play those games, tell me what you do without telling me what you do. I sell information.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's exactly what you do. That's what the papers have always done.
So, that's what we do. And
you want to be transparent about it, even if the other groups are not.
Right.
So have you ever, or maybe do you think, ever been in a situation where you're like, I don't know if we run this, it's going to really hurt our advertisers, or we might lose this advertiser, or you try to keep a Chinese wall between those decisions?
We take a deep breath and do it anyway.
Chinese wall. Yeah. No, look, if you have ethics and you have integrity and you want to do things a certain way, then you got to bite the bullet and say, well, we just report the news. If the advertiser pulls out, that's a different department, you know?
Yep, and that's basically what we do. We know the Watcher story is a great example of that. You know, it was a Coldwell Banker sale, and they were named in the lawsuit. And you know, at the
They were in
time,
the news article.
real estate was a huge part of our advertising model. And Coldwell was really understanding. It was the facts. It was, you know, but we had to. And
Right.
there have been other times that, I, I might lose the ad, but I'll have my integrity at the end of the day, and we can't be accused of, doing things for the sake of the bottom line.
Right. Right. But there must be a point at which you do decide. I mean, you can't put everything in the paper, right? So, revenue aside, there's a point at which there must be a process from a not necessarily a business standpoint, but an operational standpoint where you have to pick and choose between stories that you cover and things that you don't cover, right? So what's kind of the process of that? Like, how do you determine? You can't put everything in the newspaper. It would just never stop, you know?
Right. We wouldn't have enough space.
Right. Of course.
And besides, who would read it?
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So you want to have an interesting paper. You want people to read stuff. So what's the process, that process of deciding what's newsworthy in the leader's opinion, really?
So the reporters go to the meetings. They basically make the bulk of the decisions on what it is that they find newsworthy from what comes out of the meeting. And, that's one of those things that can change on a dime. So while the editorial staff reads all of the agendas in advance, and we'll sort of highlight some things for the reporters. So the reporters read them themselves, and we get a full packet with the full text of everything. Everybody goes through and reads it, and we sort of have an idea as to what is important. New ordinances, changes of regulations that affect the most residents, but even something that affects, a small number of residents that, could be a big story. If it's a single zoning change that affects, one neighborhood, it's still, a big story for us. What doesn't often make it are, the nice things, the Girl Scouts that come up and get honored, and,
Right. If you run out of room, right.
We run out of room. The regular bills, we see the bills and claims for every town that we cover. So, we're watching them pass through, $30,000 in checks every 2 weeks, or $100,000 in bills this month. And,
Right.
we're looking at it because we're examining it to make sure that everything looks normal.
Well, then it becomes a news story, right? If it's 1 month, it's 150,000 and it was 30 every month, right? Then it becomes a story that you investigate.
So, so we read it all, and then we determine what's going to be newsworthy, and, and, part of what sells in the news business is headlines. So what's going to make.
Yeah, well, that's my next question. Like, what do you decide goes on the front page and, inside the fold, or whatever they call it,
Above the fold.
Above the fold, right? Because people in the old days, they would fold the paper and they might not make it down the bottom of the page.
Right. So you've got above the fold and below the fold.
Right. So even just because you're on the front page, if you're below the fold, less newsworthy than above the fold, right?
Right.
Okay.
So, and some of these meetings are really boring. I'm not going to lie.
I've been to them. Yeah, some of them are very boring. Yeah, it's hard to make news out of them.
It's hard to make news out of, the zoning board of adjustment, where everybody's, all they want is, allowance for a deck or a front porch or their swimming pool. And there's nothing really exciting about it. It's, there's nothing sexy about it, but it's really, people want to know what's going on in their own backyard, and, who's getting permission for additions and renovations and all that kind of stuff.
But that doesn't make the front page.
Well, sometimes
unless it's some bigger story, right?
Sometimes it does, but it's below the fold. Or it's on the jump page, because the stories, we call it the front page of the back page of the first section is called the jump page because that's where the stories jump to, continue down page.
Right. That's how you fit more on the front page because you don't put the whole article there.
Right.
Right.
So things like that will go there, but ours is sort of based on the news cycle and the print cycle. So a lot of meetings happen on Monday and Tuesday nights, and we go to print Wednesday at noon.
Got it.
So that way it gets printed, all the mail labels go on, and then it gets trucked up from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and gets to the post office before 6 a.m. on Thursday, goes right in the mailboxes on Thursday. And that's the business side of it. So we try to marry that business and press deadline side of it. So we try to get the whole back section and the inside of the paper done on Tuesday morning, really. And then, Westwood Council's on Tuesday night. Board of Ed's on Tuesday night.
Yeah.
So those reporters are in those meetings, sometimes well past midnight.
They do go long sometimes.
Yeah. And then they've got to write the story and get it to me by 8 a.m., put it through a 3-read process, edit it, get it on the page, and get the pages up to the printer.
Yeah. Thank God for electronic transfer now.
Yeah.
Imagine if you had to, I don't know how you used to do it in those days. You had to take it to the paper. I don't know how they used to do it. They would do the typesetting where? At the office and take the plates to the printer?
Yep.
You couldn't do that in 2 hours.
No, it was not a 2-hour process.
Right. Now, why are you printing in Lancaster?
So we were with a printer. We were with a printer in New Jersey who, on all things, a Wednesday morning when we were going to press, came and told us that he had been evicted and was locked out of his business.
The day you were, that's good timing. He must have known about that ahead of time. There's no question. He didn't find out that morning. No way.
Yeah. He came in to see Horace and I'll never forget, he was pale and white and diaphoretic and said, "I've been locked out by the sheriff's office." So we scrambled and we were with another printer in Hillside who was in business for a lot of years, and they went under and went out. And then we ended up with a printer in New York for a number of years. And then they were bought by basically USA Today.
Okay.
Gannett. And they wanted to move us to their New Jersey. They were shutting down New York. They wanted to move us to New Jersey, and they wouldn't give me my time slot.
In terms of keeping you on schedule as to when you would print and
when I would print, and they wanted to move my day. And I said, the Westfield Leader's been in business for 130 years. I'm not moving the day. We've come out on Thursday for 130 years. I'm not moving the day.
Right. But they're so big, they didn't care, right?
They were so big, they didn't care.
Yeah.
Which came back funny enough, because since the pandemic, a lot of print papers stopped printing, went out of business, or just moved to all digital in the pandemic. And now my time slot's available and they're offering it to me.
Of course it is.
But we had been, our annual This is Westfield publication had been printed. The New York place didn't have the capability to print This is Westfield for us in all color. So we had been with this outfit out of Lancaster, which is a family-owned business down there.
Doing the color, This is Westfield.
The color, This is Westfield, our annual magazine. So we were familiar with them. They were already, we were doing business with them every year. And we said, can you give me my time slot? And they said,
so you have a relationship with them, because it seems they're 2 hours away, right?
Right. Which is, it's only been a problem once when it's
like weather-wise. Yeah, weather, right.
It was weather related. And it was the blizzard that we had, which of course hit on a Wednesday afternoon. So we were able to finish the paper and get it to the printer. They printed it, but we couldn't get it up here. But nobody got mail on Thursday anyway, so, because it was a blizzard.
Was that the one that hit suddenly in the afternoon and everybody got stuck going home? I think I'm 4 miles from my house at my old office. I think it took me like 8 hours to get home. Something. Yeah. Is that the one?
That's the one.
Yeah. Nobody was prepared. They couldn't plow the streets. Everyone was out.
Yeah. It took me my usual 8-minute ride from where my son's daycare is to my house took 1 hour and 20.
Yeah. Yeah. It was crazy. Yeah. I remember that storm. That was nuts. All right.
So,
So
but
that's understanding.
nobody got mail on Thursday anyway, and the printer got it up on Friday morning before the postal carriers left. So everybody got it on Friday. Nobody was the wiser. So, if that's going to be the issue, and then I'm really fine with their 2-hour drive.
Especially if you're comfortable with them, you have faith in them, and
And their
probably,
quality
I'm
is
assuming it's
incredible.
less expensive in Pennsylvania, somewhat, or not really. It's about
It
the same.
actually wasn't. It was actually a little more.
No.
But I made a quality decision because their print quality was higher,
Oh, okay.
and their paper was better, and they're really careful and thoughtful about what products they're using. So there's a lot of paper that comes over from China that's on recycled, and if you feel it, you can
Yeah,
feel the
really
difference.
thin. Like, yeah, I know what you
It's
mean.
thin. It's got like a weird coating on it, and I don't like that, and I don't think it looks as crisp. So for the $100 extra a week that it cost me, I made a business decision that I wanted the better quality.
Now, not just any printer can print a newspaper. It's not, right. I mean, it's got to
Right.
be. You need the right kind of equipment to do it. Yeah. I mean, you don't
And
need presses, but
well,
you need something.
you need
I mean, it's not
something.
coming out of a printer, right? My HP laser printer is not printing a newspaper.
Your
It's a
HP
different
laser printer is
size.
not printing broadsheet
No.
newsprint. No.
Right. Exactly.
And it's quite a process. And we actually went up and toured the facility that prints USA Today out in West Jersey a number of years ago when they were soliciting our business. And they said, why don't you guys come up and tour the plant? So a group of us went up from the office and toured the plant and got to see that end of it. I mean, the reams of paper,
Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, they're, as tall as this room from start to finish. They really, it's an incredible operation.
Yeah, it's still, even though it's digital now, it's still, they're running through the rollers, right? Like you see on
Yes.
TV and the whole thing, right?
Yep.
They just don't have plates anymore.
Well, they do. They have a digital plate now.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
It's a digital plate, and they actually, they still have to flip the paper over, and it goes into a folding machine.
It's all automated, right?
It's all automated, and they have an insert machine for all, your coupon sections and circulars, and
yeah, and it all comes out. So yeah, I just always found it interesting, and I guess it's true with larger papers that cover states or the country, where, I mean, it's definitely a business of deciding what's news, and as to, because you want people to read your newspaper, so you want to have something that's more of a shocking headline than buried in the paper, right? Doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And that keeps people buying papers, and it keeps people advertising. But I guess it is a balance.
It is a balance to a certain extent, but I think we strike it well. I think we do a really good job of, taking the deep breath that even if it does affect the advertisers, that it's, we can't help the facts.
Right. And if they're not, for the most part, they'll be understanding of that.
Right.
But you're just reporting the information.
Right.
Yeah. So how long have you actually officially owned the paper now?
Well, we closed March 6th of last year. So I'm a year in.
So you're allowed, it's like 5 days before we all shut down or something like that.
It's exactly 1 week before they close schools.
Nice. And did you mostly work remote, even though you guys were open?
Nope, we were here.
You had to
every
come
day.
into the paper. Yeah. So, but did you split shifts? Did you, because I guess early on, we didn't really know what was social distancing. We're just learning, right?
We had a really great setup where we were all far enough away from each other that we weren't worried.
Yeah,
And
you didn't have any outbreaks in the office or anything?
We had no outbreaks in the
Oh,
office.
good.
We only had one full-time staff member who was exposed to a positive case, not in the office, and not work related. Was a friend of his had COVID, and so he stayed home for 2 weeks and had a negative test, thankfully, and that was as close as we came.
That's good. Knock on wood. That's good to hear. Yeah. My daughter got COVID at her dance studio when they were practicing outside for like 7 minutes. They had masks off. 19 girls got COVID because there was
Oh.
one girl didn't feel well, didn't tell everybody. And, it is what it is. But okay. So maybe you can tell us about, what's upcoming, what plans you have with the paper,
Well,
things like that as a business.
so we had this really archaic website. Sorry, Horace, if you're listening.
Ours have been doing it a long time. You don't just change overnight, right?
And it was something that Horace and I went round and round about, because I really wanted that website to be upgraded when I was working at the paper, and he was, very set about his way about it. And so I made a new website during the pandemic. We built it from scratch. I had these plans that I was going to hire this company, and I already had quotes from multiple companies to build me a brand new website. And clearly the revenue wasn't there to support it.
Yeah, because
So,
it was, you mean you did the work before you closed, and then you were like, oh, we're going to close, we're going to do this, and the pandemic hit.
right.
Right.
So we did it ourselves, built it from scratch, basically ourselves, except that I used a lot of Horace's code in the back end. The back end of the website was great in terms of a business model. He wrote some great JavaScripts and some other great things over the years that worked really well, and I was able to integrate it into our
So you didn't have
website.
to write it all from scratch.
No,
Right.
but but we rebuilt it and revamped it and changed it, and we're also there trying to strike a balance. So the advertisers that are in the paper are then also up on the website, which makes it a nice value buy for the advertisers.
Yeah. You get more impressions and banner ads and things like that. Sure.
Right. So you get advertising in the two newspapers and on the website for one low price. Basically, that's the sales pitch. And our website sees quite a bit of traffic for a local weekly paper. Um, and So we built the new website, and that's done well. And we're trying to strike the balance between how much news we give away and how much traffic we drive into the paper, which is also available digitally in full to subscribers on the website.
Right. So there's snippets and there's information on the site that you can read, but not all of it.
Right. You don't get the whole thing for free. So we're trying to, and that was always the model that I really sort of envisioned from the beginning of, I watched the New York Times and I watched the Wall Street Journal and I watched NJ.com and how they all did it. And I really felt like NJ.com has since adopted this model, but they were late to the game in the adoption of it, where there was some free content and some you had to be a subscriber to access it.
Well, you don't want to alienate your subscriber base.
Right.
If everything's available online, then why would they subscribe to the paper?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's striking a balance there, and I think we're doing pretty well with it.
Now, is there anything on the
Still,
website that you can't get in the newspaper? Like there's extras on the website you're able to do that you can't, it's harder to do in a print version?
so we can and have done like breaking news stories that just end up on the website, which was going on a lot during the COVID.
Because
The
things were
height of,
changing so fast and things were coming
right,
out. Yeah.
where it was like, especially in September when the kids went back to school, where it was we were in school and now school's closed and now we're all
Yeah.
going all remote. Now this
Right.
school's going remote.
There's an outbreak. We got to close for 4 more days and clean the school. Yeah.
Right. So a lot of that was really web only, because by the time we were printing again, it had all
It
changed.
was old news, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there was no really local people covering the stuff for the people in town, right? I mean, do we have, is the patch even still in? There's Tap Into, right? Which
Tap
is
Into.
only is the patch even in business anymore?
There is a Westfield patch. They do have an editor, but I don't know where that editor is. They don't. Tap Into followed like the original patch model where they have a local editor.
Right.
So like John Seelock was the patch editor for Westfield when.
Oh, I remember John. Right. He's not around anymore.
He's actually part of the New Jersey Media Consortium,
Okay.
and he lectures and he does a lot of things in the industry, and the state runs a grant program for print startups, and he's part of that board. Really smart guy. And he was working for Patch when Patch was big.
Yeah.
Um, and that has its place, I suppose. We
Well, they're
don't.
both the digital only, right? There's no printed.
Right, it's digital only. And you know they're also, they're not a brick and mortar business. So, they're not paying rent, and uh,
Yeah, everything's virtual for them.
everything's virtual, and they're not necessarily, uh, people in the town, that they cover. And, it's a franchise for them. So they're got to be paying something in the franchise fee, and then they go out and they sell their own, ad space for their particular franchise. So, I'm not sure. The news business is a tough business.
Yeah.
Um, some people will say that they don't, do print at all anymore. Uh, they shy away from print advertising at all. But you know, we've got, we're printing 6,000 copies a week. We're subscriber based, so people want it.
Right.
Um, nobody's going to pay for a paper that they're not going to actually read most of the time. Uh, and we've got 30, 40 advertisers a month in the paper. So I think, for all the talk that print is dying, our subscriptions increased during the pandemic for the first time in many years. And I think we provide a service that, even those solely web-based things, you know, don't provide. Not that they can't, but they don't. They don't dig deep into they tell you the sound bites,
Yeah, that's not the model.
and that's not our model. So,
Right.
I think we're doing something special, and something that a lot of newspapers used to do and don't anymore. And I think people appreciate that about us.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the the larger papers and things like that, they've obviously changed their whole model, and there's a lot of people, but just like when, not dying isn't the right word, but there's a change. Things are changing, so there's less print. That means that maybe the local papers do more printing, because it's not going to go away. It just kind of changes the way people digest their news. I mean, all the, like, the daily papers, I don't know if that really works anymore, because the daily news or the hourly news it's on your phone, it's on TV, it's on, and I guess the Star Ledger still has a daily newspaper, right? But I got to believe some of their stories have changed by the time it hits the driveway, you
Uh,
know?
it probably has, but I think I still, I read the Ledger pretty regularly, and what I find lacking there is the detail and the follow-up. So it's like it's still the soundbite, and
Right.
and I think that that's the void that we fill, or at least we're trying to fill. Because people say, like, I want to know more about this. I just don't want to hear, like, you know whatever the headline is. You know, I want to hear the whole story, which you're never going to get on the TV. You're never
No.
going to get, on the radio, because everything's got to be short and to the point. And I think that a lot of newspapers uh, have started being more soundbite oriented,
As opposed to
and
telling the whole story.
as opposed to telling the whole story.
Right. And I think that's more important to local people. You want to know, you don't want the soundbite of what's going on in your town. You want to know why this restaurant opened, and what's the deal with liquor licenses, and what's happened with the zoning, and why is that changing? And, because decisions are made, and I guess it affects who you want to be your mayor, and who you want to be your police chief. And, you don't want to just hear that there was some settlement with the police over some accident or whatever, but not really know why, because it's all gossip. You want to hear the whole kind of story. So I think you're right. The bigger papers, they're just trying to squeeze in everything that they possibly can, so they don't miss anything. But in the end of the day, you got to do your own research. You have to go to Google, and then Google whatever the topic is to learn more about what it is. I don't think we don't get daily papers anymore. We still get the Sunday. We get the leader. Um, and we get, I think we get the Sunday Star Ledger, but I don't really read it. My wife might.
We get the Sunday Ledger every week. We get the Journal. I pick up the Times on the newsstand on Sunday. And that's more for the crossword puzzles. I'm not gonna lie.
Where's the newsstand in Westfield? Where
Uh,
where can we buy the newspaper?
so we're for sale at about a dozen different locations. We're at every 7-Eleven. We're at Krauser's. We're at Barron.
Oh yeah, sure. Okay. Oh,
Uh,
Barron's. Okay.
we're at the new. What is it?
And you could
it's
still
now the
get the
Welsh
Ledger and the
Farm.
Times there and the Journal. You can get all those.
Yep, all those.
All right. So somebody's driving a truck in the middle of the night and dropping it in the back.
Yeah. So we don't go out with their distribution. Once ours are dropped here, I have a guy, an employee who takes them out to all the stores and puts them in the. We have one news box left that we're holding on to, which actually does sell a handful of papers every week up at the train station. You can put your 4 quarters in and get
Right.
your
And
paper.
it pops open and you take your paper. Yeah, yeah.
We have to tinker with it every now and then.
It's the last one. Is that in Westfield?
It is. It's at the train station, right by the stairs.
That's funny. That's funny.
Put some WD-40 in it recently to make sure the door opens properly. But yeah, I mean, and I think that's it's charming.
It is kind of nostalgic, isn't it? I mean, when you think of like news and I don't know, newsprint and newspapers, it was just, that was the way local was done. People get there, hey, how you doing, Bob? And they're reading the newspaper and sitting on their porch or the local coffee shop. So you were telling me about the website. What other things should we watch for with you at the helm now?
So we just moved our office down North Avenue. We were up in the tower for I guess about 15 years or so, above Rooster Spin.
Right, that's the building right on the parking lot of the north side of the train station. Right on the
parking lot of the train station.
Right.
So we just moved down. I took over Leonard Lance's old space. So
Sure.
when people ask me where I am, I say, across from the old Vine Ripe, and they say, I don't know what that is. And I said,
yeah, because that wasn't open very long. Yeah.
Where the protesters used to hang out. And they go, oh yeah, I know it.
You used to be able to say whatever that car dealership was. There were 2 of them there. Yeah. There was one on one side and there was one next to you. And that was Redcom.
That was Rochford Pontiac.
Yeah, I think he became Chrysler eventually or something. I forget the guy. He lost his lease, his floor plan finance. They want to move all those to the highways. None of the auto companies want you to be in a town anymore.
Yeah, when I interviewed Bruce Lindemann when Lindemann Buick went out, that's what he told me. They didn't want to renew his franchise because he wasn't on a highway.
Yeah, they don't make enough money. Now, do you know Greg Reddington at Redcom next door to you?
Yep.
Have you seen his space?
Yes.
Unbelievable what they did with his wife's a designer. It's just crazy.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah. They've just really went over the top with that space. But I did help. I helped them with some land use.
I love the car in there.
It's pretty funny because they're engineers and they're planners and everything like that. So I'll get like a letter from the town. Mr. Beinhecker, your application is complete. And I call up their office. I'm like, I didn't even submit an application. What are you talking about? And they're like, oh yeah, we forgot. We submitted that to the town. We put your name on it. Okay, I'll be there.
Right.
Good clients to have, but just tell me when, when I have to be at the planning board meeting on a Tuesday. Before the fact.
So we moved space and we're putting in, we're going to put in a video / audio studio to do our own videos and video type podcast kind of things.
Nice.
And I think that's, a way in which we can provide more news and in-depth coverage to folks in town.
Yeah.
And, obviously we're going to, sell some advertising within that.
So like a daily short, like 15 minutes on 5 minute, 15 minute, whatever. That's a way to get out daily news without having to, print a newspaper every day.
And let people know what's coming up. So like the plan is to do a Sunday night thing of, here's what's coming up in town this week.
Oh yeah.
Here are the ordinances to look out for. Here's this thing, that thing, and, if you can't go to the meeting, read all about it in the paper on Thursday.
Right. So you're cross promoting all of your products. Yeah. And it's not expensive to do it nowadays, to set
Not
up a
expensive
studio
to do
and
it.
make the content. Yeah.
And we run our own servers here. So, and I have a tremendous amount of space and bandwidth for that sort of thing, and to do it, on my own without needing the YouTube and the Vimeos of the world.
Yeah. So you're going to do video and audio, and you're going to put it on the website.
Yep.
Okay. Or video, you need more bandwidth, I think, right? But audio is not really that bad.
Yeah, audio's not that bad. But then, we'll bring in the local folks and interview them and dig down on issues and, and have a little fun.
Yeah, that's cool. Bring us into the 21st century, or what are we? Are we in the 21st century, or we're in the 22nd century?
I
21st.
think we're in the 22nd century now.
Are we?
But I missed a year because I don't know, this last one was a doozy.
Well, I do appreciate taking the time on a Friday morning coming out. It's basically the holiday weekend. So I appreciate it. And everybody should, follow you and follow your journey and watch for all the great changes to come with the leader, and not going anywhere. So it'll be around another 50 some odd 100 years, right? To the next generation.
Yep, we're going for 130, and I've got four little newspaper moguls coming up that I'm raising. So
Yeah. So there you go. They'll be taking it over. Is there any anniversaries coming up for the paper in terms of?
no, we had 2020 was the 130th anniversary.
Okay.
And the cool thing about that was that we were awarded Westfield's oldest business as part of the Westfield 300. So
Nice. So then maybe 20 years from now, we'll hit 150. You'll have
we'll hit 150. We'll have a big party.
sounds good. All right, Lauren, I appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time and joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Mitch.